So first of all, welcome. This is a neighborhood meeting for an Envision Franklin Amendment for 1190 Lewisburg Pike. Thank you for coming. We appreciate this from the neighbors coming and voicing your opinions and thoughts and concerns so that we as a group, both us as the designers and Bill and them as the church, can take those into account. So my name is Drake Reeder. I'm with Gamble Design Collaborative. I'm a landscape architect and land planner. And we're working with the church to explore this site as a potential for their Franklin campus. In a few minutes, I'm gonna let Rob introduce himself, Rob Sweet, who's the pastor, and kind of tell you a little bit more about fellowship. But in general, I wanted to talk a little bit about what Envision Franklin Amendment is and why we are requesting that. As I said before, we're in this due diligence for this part of the project. So the church is really just now beginning to explore the potential of this site for a campus. So we're really early in design, and some of you may have questions that are very detailed, and we will do our best to address them. But we really are in the early stages trying to figure out if this site is even a potential for the church to make this their forever home. Envision Franklin is a land use policy that establishes design concepts, and these design concepts speak to the general design principles for the areas of Franklin. So that is what we're asking for tonight, is an Envision Franklin amendment, and that will be a text amendment to allow the church to further explore this property. And so I'm going to introduce Rob. Rob Sweet is the lead pastor and teacher at Fellowship Bible Church, and he's going to tell you a little bit about who they are and what they represent. Rob, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Drake. And thank you to you all who are on the call tonight. We really appreciate that. As Drake said, we're in the early stages of exploring this property, and I just want to take a few minutes to tell you a little bit more about us, Fellowship Bible Church, and our connection to the area and why we're interested in this potential piece of property. We've been here 25 years in the area. We launched in Franklin High School and then have a campus in Brentwood. And it's at the corner of Franklin Road and Concord Road. In fact, most of the photos on the screen are of that campus. You can see in the bottom left, you kind of have a good drone shot there of our campus there in Brentwood. 11 years ago, we started a Franklin campus, and we've been in rented space, leased space. You can see a picture of that in the upper right corner. That's our area there. We're on Columbia Avenue, south of downtown Franklin. If you're familiar with the Habitat Restore space, that's right in that area. It's warehouse space that we've renovated and has served us well for 11 years. But we've been looking for a permanent home for our Franklin campus for most of those 11 years. I think we looked at more than 40 properties. Mm-hmm. And it's, as y'all know, it's difficult to find a good place. So let me tell you a little bit about our campus philosophy, and then I want to explain why we think that this could be a really good fit, both for us potentially, but also for you all in the community there. If you can kind of see the pictures of our Brentwood campus, our campus philosophy is we don't want to build just a parking lot in a building. You know, if you think about most churches, that's really what it is. We like to take a campus approach. So we have multiple buildings kind of spread out over a property, a lot of green space. We really like the beauty of our Brentwood property there, and we see a lot of similarities to this piece of property that we're exploring today. In fact, what we love most about that property where we are, or where we're looking there in Lewisburg, is how beautiful it is, and we're committed to keeping it that way. So our philosophy is we don't want people to pull up and feel like they're coming into a Walmart. We say that the worship really begins when they pull onto the property, and so we want to kind of keep a lot of that idyllic feel when they come in. In fact, the Brentwood property that we're on now used to be a horse farm. Obviously, this property on Lewisburg has that background too. So that's kind of a cool thing for us. So we had some connection to the Cross family, and we started conversations with them. And as we've explored that, we've just said, let's talk to the neighbors and let's get some input. Let's get some feedback on what y'all's thoughts are on this potential as opposed to the neighborhood development that's already been approved. Couple more things I want you to know kind of before we turn it back over to Drake, and he's going to walk through some details. And I know you guys will be real interested in kind of seeing an early design and that kind of thing is we have no interest in putting a school on the property. I know some churches are church and school. That's not us. We've never done that. We have zero interest in that. We find that that's just not what God's called us to be. We're a church. So what that looks like is primary activity on our campus is Sunday morning. Our Franklin campus right now, which is the one that we hope to relocate, has 600 adults spread out over 3 worship services. So, its average is about 200 people in a worship service. And that's what we anticipate bringing over to our permanent campus. So we're not a massive church. We're not trying to grow a big church. We're a community-oriented church that wants to have a piece of property that fits our neighborhood and fits who we are and the people that are already coming to our Franklin campus. So Sunday morning activity, we do some things in smaller groups during the week. Our students get together. You can see those images in the top left, just enjoying the green space on our Brentwood campus. We've got a sand volleyball court, and it's really a wonderful environment. We would envision something similar, kind of a park-like setting on this piece of property for our Franklin campus as well. So that's a little bit about us. Again, we've got deep roots to Franklin. We're excited about being in Franklin, and we're just interested in getting y'all's input on this, any concerns you have. And we desire to build relationships with you. If we end up there, we want to have great relationships with our neighbors. So that starts today. So again, thank you for being a part of this. I want to introduce Bill Wellens as well. Bill's a part of our team. Bill's been at the church for most of those 25 years and has had a lot of different roles and hats he's played at Fellowship. And he's the main one that's leading this project of exploration for us. So Bill, I think we'll have some things to share later on in the process as well. So thanks. And thanks to you, Drake. I'll send it back over to you.
Thanks, Rob and Bill. We just want to go over some context, and I probably don't have to explain a lot of it to you because you are all very familiar. One thing that you may not be familiar with is the church is just looking at that front 25 acres that currently sits along Lewisburg. If you were here for the previous Envision Franklin Amendment, it actually encompassed a lot more of an area. And the amendment that we are asking for is specific to this front approximately 25 acres that the church is considering for their new campus. And so the site is situated just north of Douglas Glen and Durham Manor and just west of Windsor Park. You can see there's already a couple of churches that are existing along this Fellowship or Lewisburg Pike corridor. And then we are situated between 2 major intersections, the Donaldson Creek Parkway in Lewisburg and Henpeck Lane and Lewisburg Pike. And both of those are classified as major intersections in the City of Franklin's major thoroughfare plan. And that will come up later and why I'm pointing those out to you specifically. So some of you may remember this plan. Some of you are new who may not have been here when this came through about 3 years ago now, I think. This is the plan that is currently approved through development plan, through site plan. And I think Jim was pretty close to pulling the trigger and starting construction when this opportunity arose with Fellowship. And I think it caused him to take a minute and explore it a little bit. And that's why we're here today. But just to walk you through, if you're not familiar, the previous approved plan showed a local road that connected from Crossway Drive all the way over to Lewisburg Pike, right across from St. George Way. We had 4 1-acre lots along the front with some smaller lots interior. A lot of you that are here may have been here when we had the first plan, which showed a connection to the south, which we were able to argue at BOMA, and BOMA granted us the modification to allow us to remove that. So actually, thanks from the input from the neighbors, we were able to remove that with the city, and it did have an effect on the BOMA members as they were voting. And this property as you move to the west. We have a community park in the northeast corner. That would be a required open space that's basically a public park. As you move deeper into the property, you would have another community park. And then the three homes were proposed to remain with some larger lots in the back against the hill and the existing canopy. And so just to give you a little context, if you've never seen this from a kind of a top-down view, so there are two existing structures on site. There's an existing barn and there's an existing home that Jim's mom currently lives in. The church has explored the potential for reusing some existing structures. That's one of the reasons why we're asking for a text amendment. Currently in the Envision Franklin design concept of single family, it does not allow for reuse of residential structures. I think the church is still going through the process of getting structural people to look at both the structures to see if they can be reused. But the goal here is to have the option to reuse one, if not both, of the structures in the master plan. And currently right now we're looking at the existing home to be repurposed. And you'll see where the existing drive is, and the previous plan and this new plan will both have a realignment with St. George's Way. So you can kind of see the difference in where the current driveway entrance is to where the new proposed driveway will be. And that's set for many reasons. City staff concerned about the hill up here, and a lot of y'all too are probably familiar with the dangers of cresting this hill. And so pushing the driveway as far south where we have a good line of sight is important to the city and for the church as well as they explore the design. So currently the property is under in a single family residential policy for Envision Franklin. And institutional uses are allowed in this policy, but you'll see the two underlined sections that we're wanting to add language to allow us to explore the site. And the first piece is the section that says encouraged to be located at major intersections. So we are within 1 mile of two major intersections, but we are not located directly on a major intersection. So for that reason, we're proposing some language change. And the other piece of information is the conversion of dwellings for institutional use is not appropriate. And so because the church is wanting to explore the reuse and repurpose of that existing residential house, we're having to add additional language as well to account for that. Here you can see our draft proposed language. You can see that we are talking specifically not just about this entire design concept, but specifically about the front 25 acres that the church is looking at. And so one things that were important as we discussed with the church was preserving the view shed. So we wanted to add some language about preserving the existing view shed that's there. As you drive down Lewisburg, the view of the rural horse farm, we want to preserve that as much as we can in the rural character of this area. We want to keep the 2-story maximum. And then we added the information about the reuse of existing dwellings in this situation. We felt like it made sense because of its location far off the road. And actually we feel like it contributes to the existing character by keeping the house because it's been there for many years. So here's our master plan. And like Rob said before, we're really early in the design phase. We are really conceptual planning at this point and trying to discover, the opportunities we have, taking input from you as a community and the neighbors, and trying to find a plan that fits both the needs of the church and explores keeping that rural character that's already existing. So we're lining our drive with St. George's, as was the plan before and as will be required by the city. We really wanted to keep this front green space, not only for just preserving the view shed, but also, and Rob and Bill may talk about this later, but this feeling of driving up to the church, you're kind of stepping away from the hustle and bustle of the city life and Lewisburg Pike, and trying to drive as you drive up over and crest this hill to the existing home. It's a sense of serene peacefulness, and anybody that's been out there on the site knows that the property kind of drops off back here towards the back. So as you come up here, the other reason for having this large boulevard is for stacking spaces. So it allows the church to function when they're stacking up for church services on Sunday, and helps with the overall flow of the site. We want to preserve the existing tree line that's there, keep that. So we'd come to a roundabout. The existing home is being explored for potential offices for church staff. And then as you make your way around, we'll have an outdoor chapel that is kind of used for smaller groups, smaller meetings, potential for kind of outdoor events, nothing large, a very small chapel size. And then as you make your way towards the back, where the bulk of the parking is also where the worship and children's center and having that connections building. So you can start to see this quad that we are trying to develop, and the church really values and uses as part of their fellowship. And so the quad is situated around a pond, similar to the campus that's in Brentwood, and making it feel more like a park setting with lots of trails, potential for some sports fields, and lots of green spaces for members to step outside, maybe have smaller meetings, maybe stay for a few hours, or maybe a group wants to get together and have a prayer meeting or something, and they have a park like space to be able to accomplish that. I think that's the bulk of our plan. So if you have any questions, Bill, and Rob will be here, and we'll try to answer them as best we can. And feel free to unmute yourself, or if you would prefer to put something in the chat, we can also answer it that way. So we're here to answer any questions.
Hello, my name is Melissa Liddick. I live in one of the 3 houses at the back of St. James. And while I fully support the original plans that would put residents behind my property, I am wholeheartedly opposed to having what I feel is a commercial property behind my home, devaluing it. I purposely chose my home at the back of the neighborhood away from main roads, so I would not have hundreds of cars full of strangers driving past my home on a daily basis. I purposely stayed away from other neighborhoods with knowing that the land on certain sides of them could be converted for business use. And so I am very disheartened to see that we're trying to change the already approved plans for residences to something else. I look at these plans, I see a road that's going to run at my property line. I see parking spaces immediately behind my house. I see sports fields where people are going to be, I'm guessing church leagues and things like that, playing on a daily basis. I see outdoor spaces where there's going to be noise. I assume there's going to be a lot of street lights here. I see an outdoor chapel. I see other things that are called phase 2 that aren't identified. The parking spaces aren't marked. I'm assuming these are hundreds of parking spaces. Where the parking lot is, I fear that for the runoff, since it appears to be directed towards where our homes are, going to cause flooding where we currently do not have an issue. And I appreciate that you guys like the property and it's, serene and trying to preserve that at the front. But what you're doing is you're completely removing my privacy and my ability to enjoy my property.
Thank you for those comments. Well, so we are, this is an early concept. We haven't fully explored, nor is this by any means the final plan. So we will take your comments to heart. I will say I can speak to the stormwater. Stormwater is one of the most scrutinized parts of development in Franklin. And so we as a group would not be allowed to increase the runoff on your property. And so, as we get, if this were to pass and we get further into the design stage, those things would be flushed out more. But I just wanted to give you that peace of mind into that piece.
Yeah, that doesn't give me any peace of mind. I've been down this road before. I've been promised this before, and I've had my property flooded before at a different home. So I've had multiple friends and family members that have had city engineers sign off on drainage, only to find later that their property is flooding. So that doesn't give me any, comfort at all.
Melissa, my name's Bill. I just wanted to say I appreciate your comments and totally get it. From your perspective, I understand where it would be that way and feel that way, and what you've experienced in the past seems to have some influence on it as well. And I just wanted to make myself available, that I'd be glad to come sit down with you or you and whoever and look at it and address your concerns more specifically and talk more about the issues you have. I'd be glad to do that. So just want to make that offer.
Okay, that's fine. What's the maximum capacity of all these buildings that you're trying to put on this property? How many people can we expect on a daily basis here? How much traffic is going to be driving behind my home? What are we going to do with the noise pollution and the air pollution from the vehicles? What about the light pollution from the street lights? I can currently sit in my backyard and see stars. Are you going to leave lights on all the time so where I no longer can do that? Additionally, I'm highly concerned about the resale value of my house with this behind it. I don't think for the dollar amount of our properties that anyone would be willing to pay the current price of our homes when they walk out the back door and see this. And, I've done some research. There are some neighborhoods in Nolensville that are all the same size lots, same builders, same, type of thing. And of those neighborhoods, one had a church built next to it. Now, all the houses in the neighborhood with the church built next to it are selling on average for 20% less than the other neighborhoods. And that's the only differentiating thing between the two.
Yeah, I hear you. All great questions too. We are not far enough down the road to know exactly capacity or parking spaces. There are some solutions for lighting and stuff, but don't have that design. We will do all those studies. The lighting study, the traffic study, counts for people. Right now, as Rob said, we're 600 in worship in 3 services. So that's 200 people per service in worship. But as we get into the development plan, if we get past this first phase, which is just Envision Franklin amendment, meaning that can a church go here at all, is kind of the question there. Will the language be amended to allow that? Then the next phase would be a development plan, which would have a number of neighbor meetings and planning commission meetings, et cetera, as well, where we'll get a little bit deeper into the plan. Obviously for us, this is a very preliminary draft. We're not spending a lot of money on civil engineers, traffic engineers, architects, et cetera, until we know that this could be a potential property for us. It could be a potential church. But again, in the next phase, if it does pass, there'd be plenty of time to work those things and talk those things through.
Yeah, absent that information, we can't support or oppose this, with the full breadth of information that we need to do so. And so you're asking for the amendment prior to giving us that information, which I don't particularly like. Another concern that I have is that there's already on this stretch of road 5 churches. You cannot drive down Lewisburg already when all the churches have events going at the same time. What are you going to do for traffic control? How are we going to get in and out of our neighborhood?
Yeah, well, the traffic study will help us answer that. The queuing on our property will help us answer that. If the city requires turn lanes, et cetera, or even a light signal, it would help answer that. But for Brentwood, so we also use police on Sunday mornings to direct traffic. at both entrances in Brentwood and would do the same down here. So that's obviously a big concern for us as well. That the safety and the ability for people to move up and down the road, that's a big deal for us as well. So I totally get that.
Yeah, so that's directing traffic for you. That does not help us at all.
Okay, I understand your perspective.
Bill,
This
can
is
you?
Freeman Jones. We live directly across the street at 1191 Lewisburg Pike, right there at the intersection of Lewisburg Pike and St. George's Way. And we echo a lot of Melissa's concerns about how busy the street already is and how much trouble we already have getting in and out of our house. At one time, there was a conversation about putting a stoplight in. Is that still in the conversation? Where does that stand right now?
Yeah, that'll be a traffic engineer, traffic impact study and city conversation, but it's certainly in the conversation, yes.
As we would move forward the development plan, those studies would help flush out the requirements there. Like Bill said before, we're in a master plan stage of trying to figure out if we can even submit a plan to the city to be considered. So we're still early in the process, but yes, the traffic study would dictate any sort of offsite improvements, including a traffic signal, whether or not it would be required there at the intersection.
If it's determined that turn lanes are going to be required to accommodate the church, will the road need to be widened on the west side or the east side? Can you speak to that?
I don't know. Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know the answer to that.
Previously, when we came forward, there was a certain amount of right-of-way dedication that's required. I don't know if any of y'all are aware. I'm sure you are. Lewisburg Pike is slated to be widened at some point in the future. That could be 40 or 50 years from now. Who knows the way the state's going. But there was an element of right-of-way dedication with our previous plan that was submitted. And so the turn lanes were actually interior to the property.
To the property on the west side of the street?
Yes, the right-of-way dedication is somewhere along in here.
Other comments and questions?
Yes. Hi, Greg. It's Phyllis Thompson. We live at 1009 St. George's, just inside Windsor Park. And I'm looking at, first of all, I would say I like that you've got parking at the back and the 2 stories or less. There are things you've said that I think are great. And, having a church as a neighbor, I think is not a bad thing. I don't know how that increases or decreases our property value. I think that's, something we can explore. I don't have enough information about that. I do appreciate the question about the street lights and would they stay on all the time? And, looking at the ball fields, I initially thought, wow, what a great thing for a church to have, until she said something about leagues playing there. So then I'm thinking noise level. So I'd love to hear, Bill, what you all envision for those sports fields, or ever how they're labeled. Are we talking just for your church? Are we talking like major, like high school area fields? Mm-hmm. I'd love to know that. And Greg, one thing for you, if you remember, you showed us at the very beginning when it was designed for residential, there was access going out the back. And that was always a concern for me, because I will echo how hard it is to get in and out of St. George's Way already onto Lewisburg Pike. And thinking about the 200 in and out 3 times a day on Sunday, is there not going to be another access point, or will everything have to run out to Lewisburg Pike?
Sure. Bill, do you want to address the sports fields, and then I'll address the access?
But absolutely glad to. I'll start with lights. I think you mentioned that as well. On the lights, there are a number of ways with lighting now. When we think lights, and this used to be true for me too, as being part of some development stuff, but we all think baseball lights shining in your living room window, kitchen window, all that stuff. There's a whole lot of change in that over the last 20 years. The city has some very strict and stringent requirements on lighting. We would want that too, where you can point lights down, direct lights, the candle can be lower, significantly lower, that sort of thing. And we're also very open to lights going off a certain hour in the evening and come back on, if needed, the next evening or whatever that might look like. And so there's some ways to solve that, I think, and work through those things. I really do. There's even some low-level lights for pathways if somebody's walking out at night to their car that's close or whatever. If it's staff member stuff, there's some ways to handle that. In terms of the ball fields, if you go by Brentwood, and I would encourage you to go by the Brentwood campus, we have a ton of open green space on the Franklin Road side and to the rear of our property toward the railroad track. If you came in from the Concord Road side, you come straight to those ball fields. None of those are lit. Those are green spaces that we love to use with, frankly, all kinds of people, students and that sort of thing. We're not real big league people like the big lease thing, renting it out for leagues. It's more ministry oriented for us. So if there's a connection in a community, we have a Hispanic church that's a partner with ours that wants to use it, then it makes sense ministry and be more purposeful and strategic for us. That's kind of the directive. That's kind of the way that we go about those kinds of things. And so maybe a little bit more managed than it might look initially or be thought of.
Thank you.
Sure, you bet.
Yeah, and for the access, if you remember the previous plan, there was a road that was showing connected out at Crossway. We actually went to the Williamson County Highway Commission, and they were not going to allow that connection. So this was going to be a temporary cul-de-sac until the time that connection was allowed to be made. So even with this plan, it was all coming out of Lewisburg Pike. And the peak hours are a little different. You could think of the neighborhood, your peak hours are going to be rush hour in the morning, rush hour in the evening, and then multiple trips a day. We're looking at comparing that to what would be the church, 3 services on Sunday morning, potentially a few things during the week, but for the most part, the big traffic impact being on the Sunday morning connection. And then this would have an emergency access out the back, so that if there was ever an emergency, the fire department would be able to access the property if something were to happen and the boulevard here were to be obstructed.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, this is Don Beatty, 1180 Lewisburg Pike. I think we're probably, because of the nature of our property, the most impacted by the project. We've met with the church people. Perhaps we've had a meeting of the minds of what our requirements are. And if in fact that is the case, that the church can meet our requirements, we fully endorse the project.
We appreciate that, Don. And I think that Bill and Rob are here to seek that feedback from all the neighbors and see what we can do as we explore this site further. Like I said, this is a pretty general master plan, but we will continue to refine it as we move further and further along through the process, trying to take into account some of the concerns that you all as neighbors have. Are there any other questions?
Yeah. Hey, how's it going? Apologies, I'm late. You might have already answered something similar. I'm unfamiliar with how the soup to nut process goes here. So is there an opportunity here for y'all to zone this for a commercial entity and then the church plans fall through and then you're able to sell it to whomever you'd like?
Great question. The answer is no to that. This is it's gotten approved as residential, a PUD. It would remain that. with an amendment to put a church there if approved. It's not a rezoning to commercial. Even if it were rezoning, it would be service institutional, but we're not doing that either.
Yeah, after the Envision Franklin process, we would be able to bring forward a development plan. And in the City of Franklin development plan basically establishes your uses. So whatever square footages, parking requirements, stormwater requirements, all those things that are requirements of the city would be fleshed out during that development plan stage. And that would go all the way through Planning Commission and BOMA, and that would set the zoning so that if something were to happen, that what is approved on the site is just the master plan that was approved with a development plan. It allows the city to look at a site and establishes the uses that way. And I think that's the process that is the process that we would go, as there's currently a development plan on the site for residential. So we would revise that development plan.
Got it. Cool. Thank you so much. 2 more questions, then I'll stop. Anticipated congregation size and then timeline of all of this. Obviously, there's a lot of red tape that y'all have to jump through, but curious, like, what's your goal for, like, oh, we'd love to break ground at this date?
Yeah, great question. We are currently 600 in worship, and there's 3 services, which, by the way, doesn't necessarily mean 200 cars. That would include everybody, families, and that sort of thing, or couples and that sort of thing in the worship service. So size wise, we've kind of just got some slow, steady growth just the last couple of years. I think that's less than 5% the last couple of years, 3 to 5%. So there could be some growth over time, but we don't have an interest in being a mega church, pull up to the Walmart and park, that's fine for some people. That's just not our wiring. So a little bit difficult to anticipate. We're trying to think through some of those projections in terms of what we build with a little bit of room to grow and that sort of thing over time, but also don't want to get so big that the room feels empty. So we're trying to kind of manage that. But just in terms of philosophy, maybe some of that will help answer your question. And then in terms of timeline, this is a general ballpark and things change as you go through approval processes and construction and other things. But we've kind of put in our minds that it'll be about a year in approval processes with the city. It might be a little bit less than that, but about a year of design work, kind of post that process once we know what's approved and what can be designed and built there. And then about a year in construction. Might be a little less on the front end with the city, a little more on construction. But until we were on this property, we think will be about 3 years.
Cool. Appreciate the answers. Thanks.
Yeah, sure.
Are there any other questions? Well, like I said, we're early in the stage. There's multiple neighborhood meetings that will be coming forward and opportunities to review and look forward to being on hopefully the Joint Conceptual Workshop April 24th, and then for Planning Commission. And this meeting is recorded and will be posted to the city's website, so you can share it with people as well. Thank you.
Drake, I'll say one last thing. I mentioned this to Melissa, but also for those in Windsor Park, if there are any of you that would like to get together and speak with us, Rob and I, or one of us would be glad to sit down and do that with you too. I just want you to know that's an open invitation. These things really do matter to us, and we want to do the best we can to accommodate what we can if we do in fact have the ability to move forward. So just wanted to make that last comment.
Yeah. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.